Hey everybody, we are coming to you live because we wanted to tell you a little bit about our Mexico adventure, and we've gotten tons of questions on how we were able to do such a long trip and on a budget. We want to tell you kind of like some of our tips and tricks that we found in traveling in general and in Mexico, and yeah, kind of just share like what we've learned and how we were able to do our trip. And Jesse's with me this time, which is new. So,
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so there's just a lot of simple things you can do to really cut down on your expenses when you're traveling. And it's just a lot of stuff that is kind of common sense when you think about it, but a lot of people just are on vacation and whatever, and they just kind of go wild. So a lot of the things that we do is things like buying your tickets in advance and planning your trip out far enough that you can shop and find tickets in a price range that you want. And the other really nice thing about that too is if you're putting that off too long, you'll end up getting flights that have way longer layovers and are just way less comfortable.
Yeah, what was great about this trip was we actually went with Devin and Tamara and Sandra and Ryan. So that's Jesse's two siblings and both of their spouses. And Tamara actually took the responsibility of getting our flights and Airbnb, which was so nice. That we didn't have to worry about that. And so she got a really great deal. And what we ended up doing was she just bought all of our tickets together. So we made sure we actually all got on the same flight, and then we just paid her back for that. And then same with the Airbnb. And we actually got one that was big enough for all six of us. So it was just a regular house. It had, a huge kitchen, a living room, and then it had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. So that was really nice for us. We all had our separate spaces, but then we had like that, congregational area that we wouldn't have in, like, say we all got hotel rooms. And Airbnbs are way cheaper than hotel rooms. We've gotten them our last 3 trips. We did this one, we did our honeymoon in Cancun, we did an Airbnb, and same with when we went to Thailand.
Yeah, so if you're looking to travel cheaply and you're planning on doing it, again, you have to plan in advance. So you have to schedule your time there. You have to be in contact with the owner. It's not much hassle, and the amount of money you can save is incredible. For our 20-day trip, we spent about $265 a person in the Airbnb. And in my opinion, that's actually a little bit more expensive. And part of the reason is because of the size of the building that we needed. Mm-hmm. And so in our Airbnb, we had a pool. We had the entire roof to ourselves. We had bedrooms, bathrooms, more than enough space for all of us to be comfortable. But that was a little more expensive. When Tressa and I went on our honeymoon to Cancun for what was close to 20 days as well, right?
Yeah, it was like 3 weeks.
3 weeks. I think, if I remember right, our Airbnb worked out between $20 and $30 a day, mm-hmm. and that was for both of us. Mm-hmm. So if you are planning ahead, you can have an incredibly wonderful and cheap experience. So like, while you're there, right, one of the biggest things when you have that much time is knowing how to travel slowly. And this last trip was just the best example of that I've ever had, where pretty much our system we would plan to do a large event, like we'd plan a snorkeling tour, and we'd have a pretty large day where we'd just be super tired when we got home. And on the next day, we'd plan to have a really, what we call a slow day. And so we'd sleep in late, we'd get up, we'd probably miss breakfast, we'd go out to have lunch somewhere, and maybe we'd plan a simple event in the evening. And we just would swap both of those. So you had a day to rest and a day to use that energy to really get in and explore the beauty of God's creation.
Yeah, slow traveling is definitely our favorite way to do it, because I've been on trips like when we went to Israel with my mom. It was like 10 days and it was go all the time. And we did 3 giant things every single day. And it was so hard because it was so cool, but you want to spend time doing all the different things. And it's just in my memory kind of all jumbled together because there was no space in between and time to soak it all in. And so I really appreciated about these kind of trips. That being said though, I think this trip was even better than our honeymoon because we were kind of just by ourselves and we didn't do a lot of planning ahead because we had obviously the wedding we were trying to get over, and so we're just kind of we booked the Airbnb and the tickets and we'll figure it out when we get there. And so this was cool because One, we noticed this in our trip to Thailand with Devin and Tamara, was they're a lot more like, let's go do the things. And so it's really good for us to be with them because we're much more likely to go do cool things if we're with other people who want to, versus us having to like figure out and plan everything ourselves, just because it's just not fun to plan things. But yeah, so the slow days was really good, especially with the heat that you're not used to and just like walking everywhere. You get so tired, and so having those smaller days to like recover so that you can actually like enjoy what you're doing is super huge.
Yeah. Speaking of, and just another way we cut down on a lot of our expenses that I think most people aren't used to, but it's just, in my opinion, there's so many benefits to it. We did a lot of walking instead of taking taxis. And that was mostly anything that was within about a 20-minute walking distance. So it's about, a mile, mile and a half tops. Because you're not, you're not just powering to get there, right? And that's part of the enjoyable part of why the experience is so enjoyable, is because you get to just be out in the environment, you get to be immersed in the local culture, and just get an idea of all these little nooks and crannies that are around you that you're not going to find on a tour guide. And so we did a lot of walking. And then, for anything outside of that distance, we'd pile into a van and we'd taxi. But most of that was stuff that was things on the other sides of the island. Mm-hmm. And part of that, again, is into the planning ahead, right? The location of our Airbnb was in such a great spot that in a 10-minute walk, we could be to the ocean in prime snorkeling area. Mm-hmm. And we did do a lot of that.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing with the Airbnbs is, like, obviously, if you're going to a resort or a hotel, you're going to be, like, right where everything is, but everything right there is going to be really expensive. All of the food's going to be more expensive, all of the tours, so being just even a little bit outside of that area is going to give you a lot better food options. Like, we would eat tacos for, like, $1.50 or something like that almost every day. Whereas if we were somewhere else, it would have been much more expensive food and much more Americanized food, because that's who the tourists are mostly. And so that was, yeah, like a good thing that we did. When we were in Cancun, our Airbnb was a little bit further away from stuff than we had realized. So we did have to take like buses to get to like the hotel zone is what they call it, where everything kind of is. But again, we ended up spending a lot less on food and different things like that. So the bus was worth it. It was like, less than
like
$1.
50 cents or something.
Yeah, to get there. So, yeah, it does add, if you're not used to doing that kind of stuff, maybe a little bit more pressure, especially the buses, like trying to wait for them, know where they're going to stop, stuff like that. But if that's something that doesn't like freak you out, then it's way, way cheaper to do that.
Incredibly. It's a super efficient form of travel, as far as expenses go. And that's, that was a big part of it for us is, like just little ways that you can cut down on your expenses so that instead of having a trip that you can only afford to be gone for a week, if you are able to cut down on your expenses significantly, you can space that same amount of money out for 2 or 3 times as long. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was just little things like changing our modes of transportation, lots of walking, taxis, not eating on the tourist strips, right? Those are intended to catch people who are just there for a short experience. But I mean, if you're looking at being in a place for upwards of 2.5 weeks, you don't want to be spending $20 or $30 a meal. But it like literally, if you walked 3 blocks away from that area, you could find prices for, an authentic Mexican experience where you'd be spending $2 or $3 a person. And if you walked 2 or 3 blocks back towards the tourist areas, that's why they're called tourist traps, you'd spend $15 or $20, which gets expensive if you're looking at eating out regularly for 20 days.
Yeah, and that's the other thing we did was we didn't eat out every single meal. We did go to the grocery store quite often, and we would get different things, mostly breakfast stuff. We would get like yogurt and fresh mangoes and granola and make our own little like yogurt parfaits that were so good, and that way we like cut out a whole meal that we pretty much never went out to breakfast, and then different snacks and stuff as well to sustain us throughout the day. Just because we're like, so high activity, you get way more hungry than just 3 meals a day. So we would do a lot of snacks that way, which, of course you can make your fresh Mexican guacamole and stuff like that. So we were all about that. and different things like that. So if you get groceries, you can cut down on a couple meals like that as well.
One way also that we cut down on a bunch of our expenses is for a lot of our long days. So we're planning on being gone for, 10, 12 hours that day at least, adventuring, exploring. We'd pack lunches. And that's another super easy way. Again, you drop by the grocery store, you spend $20 and you have 4 or 5 lunches. And it's just a super cheap way to do that. And then, you're not like, you just sometimes when you're out and about, you don't just have a restaurant on every single corner. It depends on where you go and what you're doing. But it was just super nice. And the other little thing we did too is buying your water in bulk, right? Mexico, you can't drink the tap water. That's true of most countries. But it just depends on where you're at and what you're doing. But yeah, that was, specific to Mexico. We found we could wave down they have these little drivers that go around the town and like once every morning and play this terrible song that's super catchy and really frustrating. But you could go out and for like $1, you could buy a jug of water that would last us like 2 or 3 days. And, instead of just every time you're thirsty, you walk into a gas station and spend $1, right? It's just these little tiny things that you do, but it takes your expenses down a significant amount. And that's the type of stuff you have to do if you want to travel for a long time on the budget of someone who's traveling for a very short amount of time.
Yep. Another thing we did was, actually, before I say that, a question we get a lot is, people, like I said, ask us, how are we able to leave for that amount of time and afford that? And so something we just do is we're pretty frugal people to begin with, but we also know that traveling and those kind of experiences are what we would rather have than just stuff. And so we purposely save for trips like this because that's just something we're really passionate about is traveling. And we just enjoy it so much that we purposely don't spend a lot of money so that we can do things like this. And even like, this was kind of not a last minute trip by any means, but within a couple months it was like planned and we went. And so that wasn't like, a lot of people wouldn't have time to save up that much money in that amount of time. But since we just are kind of consistently doing that, then we were able to hop on.
So. Yeah. I mean, we just live in a way where we budget our lives because we want to prioritize the experiences that we know we love and enjoy. And for both of us, that's been traveling and continues to be so. Some of just my favorite experiences in life have been exploring the world. And if you haven't done it or if you think you'd like to do it, I can't recommend it more. So I think with that, we'll kind of transition into just a few of the things, just some highlights we had for the trip. Just because it was just such an incredible amount of time and we could talk for hours about what we did and what we saw. But we'll just brush over a couple highlights and then we'll total up our total expenses, which should surprise most of you. So what was your highlights?
So my favorite thing we did was the buggies. I know I posted a lot, so a lot of you have seen pictures, but we rented these 2 little colorful buggies that were literally like real life Barbie cars. They were like plastic inside and had like a steering wheel and like 2 buttons, and that was like it. And so they were crazy, and we did break down at one point. So they were as sketchy as we had thought that they might be, but it was totally worth it and absolutely my favorite part of the whole trip.
Yeah, that was an incredible day. We drove around the island in these crazy little buggies full of a lot of character. If anyone hasn't driven a Volkswagen Bug before, that was my first experience in a manual transmission Volkswagen. They shift a little differently, and those ones had a lot of miles on them, let's put it that way. And so it was a really fun experience, really fun driving experience as well, and just an absolute wonderful day. We got to tour the island, we got to drive around and look at the ocean. We, again, packed lunches. We pulled by on a abandoned structure that was falling apart into the ocean, and we pulled over there. And that's the little things you do. You slow travel, you see a spot you want to check out, you just pull over because you're not running out of time. And we just pulled in, we had lunch, we played on the beach, we got back in the buggies, we continued our loop around the island, and it was just an incredible experience.
So your favorite part was?
So overall for me, it was a dream come true to travel with my brother and sister and their spouses. It was just,
and me.
Oh, of course. That doesn't need to be mentioned. but it was just one of those just great blessings from God to be able to travel with my family, my wife, my best friends, the people who I want to be with the most in the world, and to just share an incredible experience like that was just it was awesome. But as far as like specific events we did, snorkeling for me, I just always loved snorkeling. I started snorkeling when I was like 12 and just found out I prefer to be underwater instead of out of water. And so yeah, the clarity of the water, the amount of life to see, from stingrays to sea urchins to crustaceans and puffer fish and all barracudas, all sorts of just incredible things to see. It was a wonderful experience, and I love snorkeling. I hope to do as much of it as I can. And yeah, I think that was just my personal highlight. And we had so many cool opportunities because, again, our Airbnb was a 10-minute walk. Again, that planning, where do you want to be? What are your goals while you're there? And for me and my brother, one of our high priorities while we were on this trip was to do a lot of snorkeling. And Cozumel has world-class snorkeling and diving. And so it was just an incredible experience.
And actually, that's another thing, is all 6 of us brought our own snorkeling gear. So we all had our flippers, our masks, and our snorkels. And so we were able to do tons of snorkeling just completely by ourselves, where we would walk to the ocean, find a spot, do it. And, we would go to the beach, different, like every time we went to the water, we'd bring our stuff and they'd get to snorkel. And that was really cool. We only went on one snorkel tour because tours are definitely just one of those things that are more expensive. You can find better ones for sure and do like group discounts. But we did one snorkel tour, and that was because there was a couple really good reefs that we wanted to go to that you need a boat. And so we got a boat. And what was cool is it was just us on the tour in this tiny little boat with these 2 people who are our guides. And so they brought us to these 3 other reefs that we got to see that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to just like walk to or whatever. So that was another thing we did. Obviously, if you're not like a huge snorkeling person, then it might not be worth it to buy your own gear and bring it. But if that's something that is huge on your list, then it's worth it. So
yeah. And so another funny thing about traveling slow that most people probably will scoff at, but is very true, trust me, is you are going to miss American food.
Yeah, it's true. We hit Mexican food pretty hard the first couple days, and a couple days in I was like, wow, I was really hoping I could make it longer without wanting a burger, but all I want is a burger. And we did actually find the best burger place while we were there, but that was later into the trip. So we had a lot of tacos, a lot of very late night taco trips.
Yes.
And it was great, and we love the Mexican food, but sometimes you just really want some pasta or just like something from home. Yeah. Our first trip to when we went to Cancun for our honeymoon, we found this one place, and we went there pretty much every single day because they had like the best pasta ever. And I think I ate tacos once that trip. He didn't even have any Mexican food, and it was like whatever. Their food was so good. We did not even care.
Yeah. But so yeah, like one of the things is just if you're planning on doing slow traveling and you see a spot that looks like it has some pretty decently priced and quality American food, just file that away for later, because you're going to get there and you're going to have 4 or 5 days of just incredible culinary experience, and then you're going to be like, in the back of your mind, you're going to be like, dang, I could use a hamburger right now.
Yeah, we did a couple Pizza Hut runs, and we went to Subway once, so yeah. Gotta fit those things in sometimes.
So the other really cool thing about spending as much time as we did on the island is, in that amount of time, we got to explore pretty much everything the island had to offer. At least everything we wanted to check out. And that's a really cool experience, to know that you went to a place, you did everything you wanted, you saw everything you wanted, and you conquered it. And I have no particular desire to go back to Cozumel specifically. Now, there's so much more of Mexico I would love to see and be a part of. So that's just a place that I have checked off the map for me. And I fully recommend that if you're interested in a paradise, an island experience, it's an incredible place to be. It's just budget friendly and beautiful, and has really friendly. The locals are all super friendly, and It's just a wonderful place.
Yeah.
Um,
The cool part about that was, so Cozumel is an island for any of you who didn't know, and it's about a 40-minute ferry off of the mainland. And we did take 2 trips to the mainland and did some things there, but mostly we stayed on the island. And actually, a huge part of the island is like jungle and completely uninhabited. So it's a pretty small amount of space that you can actually see. It takes, what was it, like 2.5, 3 hours to drive around everything that you can actually drive around to.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's lots of beaches, there's lots of, things like that. And so there was definitely a lot to do, but it is super cool to have that, like, cool, we like kind of left feeling like we did everything, which I've never had before.
Yeah. Just to hit back on an earlier note too, another one of those little things we did just to save money is we all wanted to get boogie boards.
Oh yeah.
And so for about $30 you could buy one, or for about $30 you could rent one. So we just went into the grocery store and they just had them there. So all 3 of us guys, we all bought a boogie board, and we just take those on our beach days, and we just had them there for us the whole day. And because a lot of our extended trips, we just would rent a taxi, you just throw them in, it's not a big deal, and they were only $30, so we donated them to a family on the beach when we left, and we got a whole bunch of use out of them, and it was way cheaper than trying to rent something like that more than once.
And then one last thing is, a lot of people ask questions about what is it like to travel with COVID. So
that's true.
It didn't change a ton. Obviously masks are needed in the airports and the airplanes, and I was actually really surprised how much people were wearing masks in Mexico, especially just on the streets outside, even when they're not around people, just everyone was wearing a mask. So like we would wear masks going into businesses and different things like that. It is very hot to be wearing a mask on your face. So I didn't love that part. But I mean, honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, it really wasn't that inconveniencing, to be honest. You put a mask on to go into a business. If you're entering more of a crowded street, mostly just to be comfortable and help other people feel comfortable as well. And so honestly, not a big deal. The only other thing that we had to do 2 days before we flew out, we had to get tested at a local facility for COVID, which obviously none of us had. And
that's a CDC requirement to come back into the U.S. You have to be tested within like 48 hours or 72 hours maybe of your flight back. And so we did that. That was another expense. It was about $70
for both of
total.
us.
For both of us to do that. So it was just one of those things of like, well, we gotta do it, so whatever. But what was nice about COVID being there was that there's a lot less tourists. So people are still traveling, absolutely, but there was less people.
Yeah, it was actually kind of a silver lining, you could say. We had pretty much, we didn't have the island to ourselves, but
less,
the beaches weren't nearly as crowded, and a lot of the beauty was unobstructed by just a mass of people hanging out in that area.
Though the one downside to that is you are absolutely a target to every street vendor, because we were like the only white people walking the sidewalks at certain times of day, and so we were like, they were magneted to us. They really, really wanted us to buy their stuff.
Part of that, too, is the environment, right? Cozumel doesn't produce anything. It doesn't export anything. It has no natural resources. It's just a tourist area, right? That's all their income that comes in. And I actually have a lot of compassion for all of the third worlds right now. We think that it's tough here, but in reality, you've got thousands and thousands of people who can no longer... hundreds of thousands of people who can no longer support themselves and their family in a way that they could have and successfully did for years and years and years, because everyone's afraid to travel. And now that there's no income coming in, you have people who are literally just starving because there is no money to be made. But and out of that, you do have, it does get annoying. You get hounded by every vendor, every hawker on the street, because you are the only opportunity they have to make income that day. So there, there's an upside and a downside. But so let's cover our total expenses.
So our total expense for the entire trip was $2,750 for both of us. So it was less than $3,000 for 20 days in Mexico. Literally including everything.
Yeah, that's all our food, all our housing, our food, all the taxis.
So another thing with the COVID is flights are really cheap right now. So even though we got them ahead of time, they were still very inexpensive even for that. And so we spent $385 per person for flights. And I think, was that 2 flights there, 2 flights back each person?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
those are round trip tickets.
So we spent $770 total for
both
flights.
of us.
And then for the Airbnb, it was $265 per person. So that was split between 6 people in that Airbnb. It was $265
Which
each
you
person.
could probably get a much cheaper Airbnb if it were just
a
small, like a little apartment, which would work good for 2 people. Like I said, our Cancun honeymoon, I believe our Airbnb was in the ballpark of $20 to $30 a day.
Well, and what's crazy is $265. That's like what, 2 nights in a hotel?
Yeah.
And we spent 20 days for that. So that was crazy.
And we had an entire house to ourselves and a pool to ourselves.
And it had like this awesome like roof area too that we'd hang out on. But that was $530 total for both of us to stay there. And then, the
COVID tests that we had were like $35 a person.
Yeah.
And so minor expense, but if you are planning on traveling in the next few months, you just need to be aware that that's something you're going to have to do.
Oh, the other thing is, so our group kind of did things differently. So we withdrew money from ATMs. That's how we did it. And then everyone else would take their money. They brought a bunch of cash and would exchange it at like the banks. And so there's a little bit of difference in exchange rate there.
Yeah,
not a huge difference, but
it was really minor. And because we weren't withdrawing very much money, most times we withdraw somewhere between $200 and $300.
Yeah,
at a time,
which is like thousands of pesos because it's 20 pesos to $1 US right now.
Yeah, your dollar goes so far there.
Yeah.
Which is another big reason why you're able to travel so cheap, because you can eat out at a local place for $3 or $4 for both of you.
Yeah. So sometimes they would get a better exchange rate exchanging money than we would with withdrawing, but honestly, it was very similar. And so I would say
the convenience is a huge deal.
So I would say like whatever you're more comfortable with, like definitely travel with cash. But if you don't want to have like thousands of dollars on you, then withdrawing is definitely a good option. We did have a little bit of trial and error finding like an ATM in English and then one that would give you pesos. Some of them would just give you USD, which was weird. So
yeah, you just kind of have to find one that has a decent exchange rate and that you can navigate. I was pretty confident navigating them because while I was in Thailand, I had to navigate Thai ATMs, and they all follow a pretty similar format. And if you look around, you can usually find an English option pretty easily. And if you can't, there's always more ATMs. So
yeah.
I mean, for each person, we spent $1,300 or about $1,400,
$1,375 a person.
A person for 20
the whole
days.
Trip. And so that worked out to be about $68 per person per day. And that, I mean, includes food and, all our activities. Like I said, some of our days were like big spending days where we would go to a tour, and some days were like much smaller days. We'd kind of just hang out by the pool or walk to the beach or something. So averaged out, $68 a day is pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, some of our days, like she was saying, were pretty expensive. Everyone would get on a ferry, we'd go to the mainland, we'd grab taxis, we'd go check out stuff like cenotes and ancient Mayan ruins, and all that stuff costs to get in, costs to get there, costs to get back. So you'd spend like $100, maybe $200 on your most expensive day there. But then you come home, you have a slow day, you're tired after your hours of walking and exploring or swimming, and you come home, you have a slow day, and maybe that evening the only thing you really want to do is just jump in the water for a couple hours, and that's free because you thought ahead, right? Your Airbnb's close to the water, you brought your snorkeling equipment, and so you can have a day where you spend next to no money and still have an incredible amount of fun and enjoyment, but it just took a little bit of forethought.
So I think that's pretty much it.
Right? Yeah, I hope this was helpful or at least informative for everyone watching. And if you guys have questions, message Tressa, and she's definitely the better person to get a hold of between the two of us. So, but anyways,
So drop a comment if you learned something. Drop a comment if you enjoyed having Jesse on. This was actually really fun having him on a video with me. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And thank you and bye.